As musicians, we are used to thinking of vocals as exclusively a medium to sing lyrics. What if instead they became the defining feature of your music without singing a single word? The role of the human voice in music has changed completely over time, from shaping the origin of music itself to becoming a solo instrument with an incomparable repertoire. Today we're going to explore 3 different ways you can use vocals in your music, and none of them involve singing lyrics. We'll take plenty of inspiration from film and game score, and we're going to do this with the help of my lovely wife Emma, both in her virtual form and in her physical manifestation. Let's get started. The first technique we're going to explore is the most obvious, and that is to use lyricless singing, also known as vocalizing. On an instrumental level, as a mostly slow guitarist, mediocre pianist, occasional beginner electric upright bass player, I've always envied brass and woodwind players for their ability to shape sound directly from their respiratory system, a level of expressiveness that is unattainable by the rest of us. Vocalists, of course, take this to the next level, and with vocalizations, the aim is to use the voice very much like an instrument. Vocalizations are great at creating suspenseful intros, setting up an ethereal mood, or at leading themes. With my company Sonora Cinematic, we just released an instrument called Legato, which is great at doing just that. From the name, you might have guessed who the sample vocalist is. The next thing we're going to have a look at is using vocals as textures. The organic quality of the human voice is great at this, and you can keep it very natural or use it as raw material for some very complex sound design. Here's something that I find fascinating about using vocals for this. They pitch shift down very well, or better, they pitch shift awfully, in the sense that because of the nature of the formant, a semitone stretch is often enough to make them sound fake. But if you go really crazy, like 1, 2, or 3 octaves down, you get very interesting basses and drones. You just listened to another Sonora Cinematic library, Aria Vocalscapes, which, by the way, also features Emma as a vocalist. But how about for this we sample some new stuff with In Real Life, Emma? I know that we just released Emma Legato and we did a lot of sampling for that. And I know that last year we did Aria Vocalscapes and we did hours and hours and hours of sampling. But just for the sake of this video, I thought it would be cool if we could do some more. Do you remember the improvisations that we did for Aria Vocalscapes? Yes. And that kind of move between the two. Okay, that's kind of like very sound designy. But basically I want to do this with a bit more complex harmonies. Suspended chords could work very well in this. Yeah. You could improvise between these 3 notes. Yeah. So that's like C, D, G. Starting from the C and starting from the F maybe.
Okay, so a bit different to Vocalscapes then.
Yeah, quite different. Like I quite like using like suspended harmonies because they're not major, they're not minor, so they kind of don't restrict you. We tried a bunch of microphones before we started recording last year. We tried, I think, 5 or 6 different microphones and preamp combinations. And the thing that sounded by far the best was this humble Aston Origin through the super analog pre of my SSL6. So that's what we're going to use. You're going to do this the super lazy way. I'm not even going to put a pop filter on it. but that's fine because we're not using any words with P's or T's, okay? Basically, make sure that you don't spit on the microphone, okay? Okay, so actually I've done a lot of mixing, a lot of editing. We recorded a lot of stuff. I have, I think, 8 little Kontakt instruments that I made. I've spared you all the editing, of course, and here are some of the most interesting that I came up with. On this one, Emma kind of morphs naturally from an humming type of sound to a sung vowel. I have a bit of a Strymon Big Sky on it, which I'm really enjoying at the moment for this more sort of like granular cinematic stuff. Really cool texture, I think. Let's try a few others. I'll show you one of these suspended chords. So this is the sus2, for example, one of the many variations of sus2 we took actually. So, of course, and you'll know this if you're familiar with our Aria series, the idea with this kind of non-synced articulation is that when you play a chord, you get this sort of like interesting, almost random overlap of harmonies. Very nice. And we also took some whispering sounds, actually. So, for example, this is from a sh type of sound to a ha type of sound. Shh. I'm sure this will sound pretty cool, layered on top of something. And we took a few variations of this. So we have sh to h. Shh. And we even have the same with the s sound rather than with the sh. Again, kind of interesting. And of course, this is all pretty dry, so let me bypass the reverb. Let's try the sus4, for example. This is just the dry signal, but then with some reverb on top. And this as one of the granular options. If you want a more traditional type of cinematic shimmery sound, one of my go-to is always going to Native Instruments Replica, and you can put it in diffusion mode. And you set the amount pretty high, size pretty high, and then you want to put this in milliseconds, and you put it all the way down, so you have no delay whatsoever between the beginning of the sound and the beginning of the delay, and essentially it sounds like a reverb. But now, how about we use some of these samples that we collected for some granular synthesis? Let's open Pigments. I've recently covered Pigment 6 in this video, or is it here? I can't remember where YouTube cards go. If you want to have a look, the granular engine has had some really nice upgrades with the latest version. I used it to create a bunch of presets which should make a great addition to my palette. And to finish off, one of the most interesting and underestimated uses of vocals, in my opinion, is to add rhythmic interest. Plenty of sample libraries have rhythmic elements. They can work very well. I quite like some of the modders in Spitfire's Albion Solstice. We have some great stuff in Aria Vocalscapes. There's also a great sample logic library from a couple of years ago called Vocal AI, which is great at the more crazy articulations. Vocals can work as motors that drive a cue forward or used rhythmically in much more subtle ways to add the movement. A masterful use of vocals as rhythmic elements is all over the score for the film Arrival. We'll talk about it in a second. Let's close this with a few soundtrack suggestions. Maybe this can become a thing we do on the channel regularly, like record time, but for scores, I don't know. There are countless film and game scores that are a huge source of inspiration for their use of vocals in this way. I'm going to mention 3 I think are absolutely worth watching, playing, and listening to. Number 1, I just mentioned Arrival. This film has an incredible score by Jóhann Jóhannsson. The music is filled with great vocals. The track Heptapod B is probably my favorite. It's the cue that plays under the voiceover illustrating the mysteries of the extraterrestrial species that arrived on Earth. Dune, both part 1 and 2 are obvious choices, and even more obvious is the track I'm going to suggest, Paul's Dream. I'm going to say though, music that really deserves attention in my opinion is the Dune sketchbook that has several of the sketches Hans Zimmer prepared for the film. Amazing vocal textures in there, and more in general, amazing use of vocals for music sound design purposes, I would say. There are also plenty of information out there on the role singer Loire Cotler played in shaping the music. And while I'm saying this, I just realized that I picked 2 films that are both by Denis Villeneuve. And finally, a game. Ori and the Will of the Wisp has incredible vocals. My favorite is probably the menu music, which is basically the main theme, but Light or Nibel from Blind Forest is also great. I really hope you've enjoyed this. If you want to know more about Aria Vocalscapes and Emma Legato and want to support the channel, have a look at the walkthroughs at the Sonora Cinematic channel. They're here and here. It's a way to support us so that we can keep making awesome instruments and to indirectly support this channel. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.